Hello, healers. My name is Ben, and this is the Moss Report. I'm here today with my father, author and founder of the Moss Report, Dr. Ralph W. Moss. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Ben.
So I understand that you have some information to share with us today on the subject of vitamin D as it relates to cancer and health more generally. I'm very interested in this subject. So what have you found?
Well, I became interested in this because of a family member who has very low vitamin D and has been getting injections and, supplements for it. And I became curious about my own vitamin D level. So I had a test done. It's not very difficult to do. I had the results back in a day or two. And it turned out that I had a insufficiency of vitamin D. That's not a deficiency. Deficiency would be a score under 20. I think mine was 27, but that's still considered to be low, lower than you want it to be. So I have upped my intake of vitamin D and try to get out in the sun more often, because that's how you naturally get vitamin D, as you are exposed to sun radiation, and it builds up vitamin D in your skin. So I'm doing both of those things, and then I'll take the test over again in a few months with my doctor's agreement, by the way. And my doctor was actually fine with me taking 5,000 international units of vitamin D per day, but I did that for a few days, but then I'm going to switch to 2,000 units of vitamin D per day. And it's very easy to do, not expensive, of course, and it's easy to take. So there's no reason not to, but I'm really glad that I had this test, because I wouldn't have known basically that I had any problem at all. And I'll just say anecdotally that I've just had a lot more energy in the last few days, which is just a single case, of course, and could be a placebo effect, but I've just noticed a big difference in my vitality, my vim and vigor. So I think it's important for people to know this. But the main thing that the medical profession urges people to have sufficient amounts of vitamin D is because of the bone, strengthening the bones. And even that's under dispute. But for those of us in the cancer community, for a long time, this has been discussed as a potential benefit to cancer patients, to resistance of progression of cancer. So that, of course, professionally, and personally, that's one of my main interests. And I think that's the next place I went in terms of my investigation of vitamin D was, well, how does this benefit you in terms of cancer?
Is there science to support its use to help prevent cancer? And was that what you were looking for when you went digging?
There's a lot of studies that show that vitamin D is of benefit to cancer patients. It's been summarized recently by well-known reputable scientists showing benefit to different kinds of cancer, to people taking vitamin D or getting vitamin D through sunlight. So I didn't think this was at all controversial. And then I found a paper by several scientists that we've quoted very often in this podcast, Ed Giovannucci and Walter Willett in particular, at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School, the top tier of scientists. I found this article from the New England Journal of Medicine, probably one of the two most cited medical journals in the United States. And it basically said vitamin D is of no use in cancer. It had no effect in terms of preventing the occurrence of cancer.
Seems disappointing.
Very. Knocked me back a bit, for sure. But I have some further things to say about this that will explain it. So don't just run away and take away a negative message. There's a lot more to this. The paper is called Vitamin D Supplements and Prevention of Cancer and Cardiovascular Disease. And there's a whole list of authors mostly from Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. And there's also two authors that our viewers might be familiar with, Ed Giovannucci and Walter Willett. It has one other thing going for it, which is that it's a randomized controlled trial. Some people got 2,000 international units per day of vitamin D, and other people got a placebo. And then they were followed for a length of time, and they saw how many people developed cancer and what kind of cancer and so forth.
And how many people were in this study?
There were 25,871 U.S. men aged over 50 and women aged over 55, including 5,106 African Americans who participated. And the primary endpoints were total invasive cancer and major cardiovascular events.
What does that mean, primary endpoint?
So when they began the study, they stated in advance what their objective was, what they were hoping to measure at the end. And the main thing they were looking for was total invasive cancer and also major heart and stroke-related events.
Okay.
And then their secondary endpoints were site-specific cancers, cancer mortality, and additional cardiovascular events, meaning they'd look at those also, but it wasn't the main focus. This is necessary in randomized trials. They want you to state in advance what you're going to look at, so you don't just engage in like a fishing expedition to find out afterwards that there was a subgroup of people who ate artichokes 3 times a week or something, and maybe there was 10 of those and 3 of them had a benefit, so you could claim that there was benefit after the fact. No, they wanted to look at the main things. And they gave each person, as I said, 2,000 international units per day, which is a little more than most people would take, I would say. There are problems here, which we will get into, but by and large, it was a very good study, well-conducted study, and there was very little difference between the people who got the vitamin D and those who got the placebo, a 3% reduction. And then for the secondary endpoints that I mentioned, there was actually a decrease in cancer deaths seen of 17%, and prostate cancer 12%. And for the cardiovascular disease events, there was a reduction of about 4%. But those didn't rise to the level of statistical significance, and they didn't show primary benefit. So you need to get to a certain level of benefit before it would be statistically significant. Usually that means that there's less than 1 in 20 chance that the results that you are finding are just by accident.
So what were their conclusions?
It's all summed up in one sentence. Quote, vitamin D supplementation did not reduce invasive cancer incidence or cardiovascular events.
Oh.
And this was disastrous.
I mean, if you're looking to vitamin D to be something for health, this doesn't really wave any flags saying, take me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm smiling because there is a lot more to say about this.
Well, but
it's
all right. But this was a study that involved a lot of people. I'm sure it took a great deal of time and money and effort to poll and to administer and track all of that data. I mean, and for them to make such a single sentence statement that it had no effect on cancer or cardiovascular events, I mean, seems pretty conclusive.
It sure does. It sure does. And this was picked up by the New York Times and I think hundreds of other outlets. It's been cited, I think, about 500 times by other papers. So going forward, anybody writing or thinking about vitamin D and cancer has to take this into account. But there's much more to this story than meets the eye.
Okay, well, I'm all ears. What else did you find in your research?
I came across this paper from 2019 about the vital study.
Oh, is that what the other paper was known as in the scientific community?
Yes, vitamin D and omega-3 trial, otherwise known as the vital study.
Oh, all right.
Well, not everybody agreed with the way the vital study was conducted, and 6 or 7 of them published a paper in the European Review for Medical and Pharmacological Sciences. The only person I know on this list is Barry Sears, who is with the Inflammation Research Foundation, but the others seem like totally reputable people at good universities, both in the US and in Italy. So I have no reason to in any way question their knowledge or their right to have an opinion. But what jumped out at me and was quite compelling was when I read the following paragraph. Subgroup analyses, which was begun within the vital study itself, raised the possibility of different effects of vitamin D supplements on cancer incidence according to BMI. So what's BMI? Body mass index. In other words, the weight of the person. The BMI.
Okay. So they're saying that the vital study failed to look at the data by body mass index.
Correct.
Okay. So why is that relevant?
And they said there was a remarkable observation that normal weight individuals in the vitamin D group showed a lower cancer incidence compared to those in the placebo group. The risk reduction in that case was 24%.
Oh.
On the other hand, vitamin D supplementation at a dose of 2,000 international units per day may not have led to similar results in overweight and obese participants due to the higher vitamin D requirements of such individuals.
Okay. Huh. Wow. They're looking at the other studies' data, and they're breaking
Correct.
it out by groups of people based on BMI, body mass index, which generally refers to their weight at their height, essentially.
Right.
And they're saying that if you look at the data in that way, people with normal weight had a significant benefit in cancer incidence reduction.
Yes. A 24% reduction.
24% reduction.
Right.
Well, that's very significant.
I'll say.
And so, okay, well, this raises a number of questions for me. So first of all, can I pepper you with some of these questions that brings up?
I may know the answers. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's just start with, why do you think the people who put all of that time and effort into the study initially failed to identify this information?
That factor, the factor of weight, of obesity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
I have no idea.
They did gather that data.
Right.
And these people were able to look at the data and then find this information about a reduction of cancer incidence that's very significant. That's confusing that the normal group had a significant benefit, but the group that were on the higher side of the BMI did not see it. And this paper states that they think it might be related to the higher vitamin D requirements of those people. Is that just the relationship between the amount of blood in the body, for example?
It's related to the amount of fat in the body, because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So you put the ordinary amount, let's say 2,000 international units per day, into a person with a lot of fat, that fat is going to soak up the vitamin. It won't be available for the rest of the body. It won't circulate. So if you took a vitamin D test, such as I had a few days ago, it's not going to show much improvement at all. And therefore, presumably for cancer, it's not going to show a benefit.
Okay, well, I think I'm getting the picture here. You're saying that vitamin D as a supplement is given in a form that's a little oily, or it's like in an oil form, and that when a person who has significant fat on their body eats that supplement, it kind of just gets sucked up by the fat tissue and then doesn't stay in the bloodstream in order to have an effect. Is that
correct? That's exactly right. Exactly.
Okay. So but that's speculation on the part of these people who've written this paper. That
I'd say some of their data is just derived from the original paper, but they say that obese adults need at least 2 to 3 times higher doses of vitamin D than non-obese adults to treat and prevent recurrent vitamin D deficiency. So really what the obese people should have been getting was 6,000 to 10,000 units for 8 weeks, followed by maintenance therapy of 3,000 to 6,000 units per day. I want to make a note here, though, Ben. I'm not making this as a prescription to other people in our audience to go start doing levels at that high, because at too high a level, vitamin D can be toxic. So I'm not in any way saying to go do that. And even I, who think I know a lot, ran this by my own primary care physician before I even went to a level of 2,000 a day. So be careful, be cautious with this. I'm not making this as a suggestion that you, the average person, start taking high levels like that.
All right. Well, that's a very interesting finding that contradicts, in some ways, what the original study had as their conclusion. Did the people who made the first study, the original study, find out about these results as well? And did they have any response to it?
Well, there was definitely a response. It doesn't put itself in the form of a formal response to these authors, but now I want to give you the punchline, as it were, of this whole discussion.
Okay.
This is a paper from 2020 from the JAMA Network Open, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and the title is Effective Vitamin D Supplements on Development of Advanced Cancer. The subhead is a secondary analysis of the VITAL randomized clinical trial. So here's a further exploration of the original paper. And guess who the authors are? It's the same authors. The same authors as the original authors.
Oh, all right, good. So they revisited their own data and republished some more findings that they were able to pull out of their study.
Which, coincidentally or not, addressed the criticism of the American and Italian writers that we talked about previously. The objective of this paper is an evaluation of whether vitamin D reduces the incidence of advanced, that is to say, metastatic or fatal cancer, and an examination of the possible effects of modification by body mass index, BMI.
Okay. So they did see that other paper and they saw the data that those folks were able to pull. Did they show some of the same positive effects that the Italians got?
Yes, and also they were looking at specifically at advanced metastatic or fatal cancers. In other words, there's a big difference between a cancer that's just sitting there and can be removed with, a scalpel versus a cancer that's already spread through the body or that actually kills people. And I think we're interested in all kinds of cancers and preventing them, but I think everybody would agree that the most important thing we could have would be something that would prevent a fatal cancer or a metastatic, a spreading cancer. So that's the other modification to their new approach to the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what they show. They say for the present study, the primary outcome was a composite incidence of metastatic and fatal invasive total cancers, because the main vital study, the original study, showed a possible reduction in fatal cancer, this we didn't know, with vitamin D supplementation and a possible modification by body mass index. Okay, so this is what was being pointed out by the Italian authors. Among the results, however, a significant reduction in advanced cancers, metastatic or fatal, was found for those randomized to vitamin D compared with placebo. And the degree of the reduction was 17%. When stratified by body mass index, there was a significant reduction for the vitamin D arm in metastatic or fatal cancer among those with normal BMI of 38%, but not among those with overweight or obesity who only had an 11% reduction. They could have made the original study a study of the effect of vitamin D supplements on normal weight people, the effect in terms of advanced or metastatic cancer. That could have been the primary aim of the study, but it wasn't. The primary aim of the study was looking very broadly without consideration of weight of the people or consideration of metastatic cancers versus the less harmful cancers. If they had wanted to, they originally, if they had known in advance what the results of the study were going to be, the headlines could have been quite different.
I don't understand why it matters what the initial purpose of the study was. If this was the finding, then who cares? Why would that still not be news? It feels like it's news to me.
I'm so this is what makes me crazy, this kind of thing. And here's what makes me even crazier. The New York Times, the so-called newspaper of record, reported on the original study, the original vital study. Oh, vitamin D fails its test. It doesn't prevent cancer.
Yeah.
But they never reported on the follow-up study showing a 38% reduction in normal weight people of fatal or metastatic cancer. Never reported on it. And what's even crazier is that one of their famous science writers, after this paper came out, repeated the original claim that the study has shown that it had no effect on cancer.
Yeah, I don't know what even to make of that. Either just straight up ignorance. I mean, what kind of agenda could the newspaper, the Times, have for withholding or not reporting on something this important and this significant that helps to fight off metastatic or fatal cancers among people in a healthy BMI range? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's a long story. I mean, science writers like myself, in general, if they depend on access to top scientists and up-and-coming scientists to get their opinions and their information. And they go by what the people, their experts, tell them. And they're not going to go against their experts. Now, here's a case, though, where Walter Willett put his name on this paper. Ed Giovannucci put his name on this paper, on the second paper. But nobody says one peep about the fact that something extraordinary had been found, had been discovered in analyzing the data, something of world-shaking importance.
Well, we're talking about it.
Yes.
So you have some show and tell here for us?
Yeah, I have a little show and tell. The vitamin D, I used to take 1,000 units per day. The vitamin D I'm now taking, I'm taking 5,000 for a couple of days just to bump my number up because it was low and insufficient. And then I'm going to switch to 2,000 per day with my doctor's agreement. And I don't want to sound like a broken record like a lot of people, insist, see your doctor. But this is a case where you need to have a certain light degree of medical supervision because you won't know without taking the test, which isn't hard to do, but you won't know how much vitamin D you've got in your system. But I'm going to take it for a while. I'll take it to 2,000. I'm going to retest it again in a few months, and then we'll see. I have a certain number in mind, what would be in the nice middle of the normal range, the sufficient range, and then go to that point.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add on this topic before we wrap up?
Yes, and that is that very often in science, a group will say something, they have a big megaphone, they have access to the big journals, and their famous names and so forth, and it'll draw a negative conclusion about a supplement, let's say. And then the counter argument comes from a lesser known group, people who are more advocates of the treatment in a lesser known journal and so forth, and they get no attention. What's unique here, almost unique, is that it's the same group that published the original study that then published the counter argument, or the other shoe dropped, if you will. In other words, yeah, but in normal weight people, this has a tremendous effect on the cancers that we fear the most, the fatal and metastatic cancer. So we don't have to argue one group at Harvard versus some group in Podunk. It's the same group at Harvard doing the same, just reanalyzing the data in a different way, and you get this crazy 38% reduction in metastatic or fatal cancers with a literally a pill that costs 1 or 2 cents. It's crazy making, but what the heck, now we know. Now we know, and so everybody has to now act on this information to the best of their own ability.
Well, thank you for doing that research and, as always, for the education. We appreciate it very much. But for now, for the Moss Report, I'm Ben Moss. How are you healing today? Thank you for watching. We really appreciate all of the support. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, and visit themossreport.com. We wish you all the best for health and healing.